Hello and welcome back to Mads World. This is the season 6 finale of Mads World and I'm your host Mads. If you have enjoyed this season, please remember to subscribe, rate and review the podcast on your favourite listening platform. Follow the show on Instagram, it's at madsworld.mp3 and check out the website, it's madsworld.co. For the season finale, I'm over the moon to be joined by anonymous relationship expert, author and voice of reason, let me explain. Layla is a single mother of one and her blog has blown up over the last 5 years. Consisting of experiences with dating, relationships and situationships with fuckboys, the blog aims to educate and empower other women, helping them to live a fuckboy-free life. Layla has qualifications in psychology, counselling, sexual health and sociology, and she has spent her career working in the public and voluntary sector, helping people to work through or leave fucked up relationships, to change negative patterns of behaviour and to develop self-love and good self-esteem. Her Instagram page, which has amassed over 215,000 followers, has become a supportive community of women sharing their stories and realising they aren't alone. The embarrassing and humiliating feelings that women experience following terrible situations with men have allowed people who she inspires to bond over their stories. Up next, we chat about online trolling, how her work as a social worker has shaped her recent career, the pros and cons of anonymity, and her thoughts on the rise of reality TV celebrities, mental health, and dating shows. Hi Lala, how are you?
I'm really well, thank you. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. Thank you so much for jumping on the podcast. You are such a great fit for Mads World with all of your blogging work and everything that you do through social media as well. So yeah, it's awesome to have you here.
Thank you. I feel honoured to have been invited.
Oh, I understand that you used to be a social worker for 15 years, and I'm just interested to know what made you move into a more media-focused career?
It sort of wasn't intentional, really. It wasn't a planned thing. I never sort of sat there and made a career plan or a business plan. It was totally accidental, really. I had reached the end of a string, it was like the last of a string of really crap relationships, and I suddenly had all these penny drop moments where I realised where I'd been going wrong. I realised the red flags that I'd been missing. I sort of just connected all the dots that I hadn't been connecting for years and years. So I decided that I wanted to write about it. I've always been really into writing, and writing is really therapeutic for me. I enjoy journaling and things like that. And so I just had this real urge to get it all out of me and onto paper. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to just write a blog, which I hoped, I guess, that would help other women to connect the dots in the same way that I had. But I really didn't think anybody was going to read it because I had no followers. I started with literally 0 followers. Mm-hmm. And people did want to read it. And so over the course of putting out those blogs, which just got bigger and bigger and bigger, I then got to the stage where I was like, actually, maybe I could turn this into a career. And the rest is history. When
was like the moment when you realised it was sort of getting big? Like, was there like was there a pivotal moment when it got like loads of views, or, were people sharing it? How did it sort of blow up?
I don't really know. I think I've just been really lucky. Like it's all been word of mouth, and it just grew really quickly. I didn't do anything to make it grow. I didn't have any like particular marketing strategies or anything, but it just the blogs in particular were doing incredibly well. They were having like 250,000 readers within the first couple of months, and they didn't go viral or anything. It wasn't like there wasn't like a particular moment. It's just, and I think that's been part of it actually, is that I've never gone from like 10,000 followers to 100,000 followers overnight. It's been really gradual. It's been really incremental. It's about 1,000 followers a week that I get just consistently. And I think actually that's the better way to grow. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it speaks to the level of engagement and just like the amount that people keep coming back to keep reading your stories and seeing what you're up to.
Yeah.
And obviously it's all anonymous, which is so fascinating. And I just want to know why you chose to be anonymous, and do you ever regret it? Would you ever want your face out there, or would you ever want to be recognized, or are you still happy with it all being anonymous?
It's like swings and roundabouts. I talk about this quite often. People always ask me this question. And I mean, there's a variety of reasons. Obviously, the first reason was that I started when I was still very much working as a social worker, and I couldn't do the two things together. So it was never meant, like I say, it was not meant to be anything. So it didn't need my face attached to it. It was just, I was just writing a blog and putting it out into the ether, you know?
Yeah.
So, but obviously because the blogs contain stuff about sex and abuse and all of that kind of stuff, I couldn't have that attached to me as a social worker.
Do you think that the anonymity of it has helped? Like, I think people kind of like that it's anonymous because it's sort of like mysterious, like, who is this person? Like, they see you as a friend, but they don't actually know you. Like, do you think that sort of makes it?
I think that helps a lot because it means that I can appeal to a more diverse audience. You know, if you're a 50-year-old Black woman, you might look at me and think, well, our lives have not been the same. I can't necessarily relate to you in the same way that I would to another 50-year-old Black woman. You know, whereas when I'm just a voice and I'm just words in writing, then it's much easier for people to relate it to their own lives because they're not having any preconceptions about what I look like. They're not making any judgments about who I am because of my style or my fashion sense or anything like that. So I think it really does help to reach a wider audience and for things to be taken much more for what I'm saying rather than who I am.
That's so interesting. And maybe people can see themselves in it as well because it is anonymous. They can see, like you said, see those things happening to themselves.
Yeah, people can apply it to their own lives much more easily rather than making judgments about my physical appearance. But there's swings and roundabouts because we do live in such a culture now which is dictated by what do you look like? What are you wearing? Especially in this like influencer social media culture. So it holds me back massively. Do you know what? There's so many, like, I could give you 10 positives and 10 negatives. Like, on the one hand, it holds me back massively in terms of earning potential. I can't go on TV to promote my book. I can't.
Of course.
There's loads of things I can't do. But then on the other hand, I get far less trolling than a lot of my peers who are doing the same job as me. I hear a lot of influencers talking about how disgusting men are and how many vile messages they get from men, and I have more problems with women, to be honest with you.
Really?
Barely any problems with men. I mean, you get the odd few idiots in comments and whatever, but I think if I was showing my face, then I'd get a lot more abuse. I'd be getting told that I was ugly. I'd be getting told that they wanted to rape me, that, all of that stuff. I'd be totally open to that, or I'd open myself up to that rather. I'm not open to it like that. That came out wrong.
No, I know what you mean. But yeah, it's also, I hate it because I know exactly what you mean. Like having a sex positive platform and everything, people or, trolls assume that you're up for it or, you deserve that kind of commentary. And it's so unfair. Even people that go on dating shows, like obviously the Love Island cast cop it a lot with trolls, but because they're putting themselves out there and they might have sex on TV and those sorts of things, people, assume that they deserve to receive those comments, which is just not the case.
It's such a weird thing, isn't it? It's that whole thing of like, well, you put yourself in the public eye. This is what you signed up for. And it's a bit like, well, not really. Nobody signs up to be abused. And I don't really understand why nobody can have a career in the public eye without people thinking it's fair game to say whatever the hell they want to them. It's a really bizarre thing, isn't it?
And it's just another career path, isn't it? Like no one's going up to doctors or going up to fishmongers and giving them abuse and, trolling them and stuff in their face. But it's probably that, the anonymity of social media in general. Like you can comment on someone's post and they don't really know you and they're never going to follow up. People just get this hate out and it's disturbing, to be honest.
It's so odd. Like I think people don't realise that like this is my job. And I'm allowed to keep my workspace safe. And, people often want to tell me, what people often say to me is they'll disagree with me. And actually I'm all right with being disagreed with. I really like to hear other sides, other perspectives. But there is a way to put across your your difference of opinion. And if you put it across like, well, everything that you've just said is nonsense and I think you need to be really careful with the way that you do, then I'm not going to react well to that. And why should I? You know, people have this expectation. And I just block. And I don't know why people are surprised by that, because I have written a book called Block, Delete, Move On.
Yeah.
And then people will be really snarky, like she just blocks people who disagree with her. Well, no, I block people who think that it's okay to come in a really rude, attacking way to tell me that my work's wrong, that they don't agree with me. Like, I don't understand why people think that there's anything wrong with that. Like with me being boundaried about what I allow into my workspace. Like you say, people are not going to go up to fishmongers and say, the way I've just seen you cut that fish, it's not even for me, but I've just seen you do it and I don't like it. And, you know, people just don't do it.
Yeah.
So why they think it's okay to do it to influencers, I do not know.
Yeah, it's very strange. And I like how you seem like you've got your head screwed on about it all. Like you're very pragmatic in the way that you deal with it. And I wonder if that comes from your previous career. And I'm just interested to know how your previous career has influenced the work that you do now, because you are very vocal on social media about things like abuse as well, which I think is awesome. So yeah, I just want to know like how that sort of impacts your day-to-day now.
In terms of what you just said at the beginning there, it's not my previous career has definitely had a huge impact on who I am and on the stuff that I do on my page, but I think it's age as well.
Yeah.
You know, I'm 40. So if I'd have been doing this when I was 20, I would have taken a total different approach to it. I was a different person, and I definitely wouldn't have had as thick a skin as I've got now. And I just like, so I think age is a huge factor in terms of being quite sort of solid, I guess, about things. But of course, yes, my social work career and all my experiences and wisdom and knowledge and academia from that world has 100% informed everything that I do on this page. I think my qualifications enable me to put things in a way that are not only factual, but to deliver them in a way that people understand, because that was my job as a social worker, is helping people to understand what's causing the problems in their lives, and looking back over generational patterns, looking at patterns of their own behavior, and trying to unravel them and unpick them to help people to be empowered to not be abusive or not remain in abuse or whatever. So everything I do comes from that. And I think I still am a social worker. I very much do social work. I just don't do it in the same way that I did when I was knocking on people's doors, you know.
Yeah, that was another one of my questions, was just about the amount of advice that, you know, you're giving out to your followers, and, you know, the amount of people that must come to you with questions and stuff. Like obviously you do like an agony aunt piece as well. Yeah. Does this ever like affect your own mental health, or are you kind of used to it because of your previous line of work?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is that as social workers, we are exposed to extremely high level child abuse, and there is nothing that anyone can tell me in the DMs that is going to shock me, because I've you know, and actually that sounds like I'm desensitized to it. I'm not. I still feel upset when I read certain things. I still have emotional triggers when I read certain things, but at the same time, I'm not going to like fall into a deep pit of darkness because I've read something, because I have dealt with probably worse, and I have been trained to deal with worse, and I think that is the key, really. The difference between social media and social work is that when you're a social worker, you get a supervisor, you'll have your whole office space, you'll have all your people there, all your other social workers, and you'll have a manager. And so when a high level, very upsetting, traumatic case comes in, you're not out there on your own dealing with it. You've got a whole support network around you. You've got people to sound off with. Whereas with this, I'm just completely on my own. I do pay for supervision now. But yeah, so it is difficult. But actually it's not the advice things that affect my mental health necessarily about this page. I think the stuff that, affects my mental health is other, related stuff, not necessarily the trauma that I hear from people, because I know how to compartmentalize that, because you can't help anybody if you're an emotional wreck. You have to be able to put that to one side in order to be able to help and empower other people.
Would you be comfortable sharing like what are the hardest parts about running a page like this?
So one of the worst things for me is when I discovered that there was a thread about me on, I don't even like saying the name of the site. You probably know which site I'm talking about. It's a bullying site that has been set up to...
Oh, what?
Oh, it's awful. And so many people are on it. I mean, don't check whether you've got a thread on there yourself, because the one thing that I would advise people is just never, ever, ever look at your own thread. I see a lot of influencers do it. They discover that they've got a thread on this place, and it solely exists for women, mainly women, to chat absolute shit about other women, always influencers. I mean, Mrs. Hinch has a thread on there, and they are like rabid beasts. I mean, they tear through every single one of her stories. They pick up on things. They try to catch her out on things. Like if she shows a receipt for something, they'll like zoom in on it and try to establish how much she spent. I mean, they're there to actually really destroy people.
It's creepy. That is so fucking creepy.
It's so horrible. Somebody that I follow who I really love, Ashley Louise James, she did a handbag giveaway, a really nice thing to just give away a handbag to her followers. And then she was posting up about how, and it was obviously people from that site had like complained to the Advertising Standards Authority that she was giving away a handbag. It's just really bitchy, horrible stuff. But that I didn't know. So for 2 years, I don't know if I had a thread or not, but when it was brought to my attention, which is something I really hate. So one bit of advice I would give to people is don't DM influencers and be like, have you seen what these people are saying about you? Because I don't need to know. Like,
I don't want to see it. Like, I don't need to.
Yeah, exactly. Their opinions are irrelevant to me. These people are irrelevant to me. But there is something about human nature, which means that when you are exposed to that, even though you can rationalize it and be like, well, these people are just dickheads. They, who spends their time doing this? Nobody can take the opinions seriously of people who spend their time doing this. But when you see it, there's something about it that goes in. So when I first saw, I haven't read it since 2019. I'm sure there's loads more shit on there. I do have people checking it because they have done dangerous things on there, like post what they thought was my address. They posted a picture of my son. So I have someone who checks regularly who will come to me and say, I think you need to look at this. But that hasn't happened for a long time. But the hard thing was they would, I think you live in this bubble because people are mostly kind of kind about the things that I do online. And I'm really out here. I'm not trying to earn a ton of money. I'm not trying to become a celebrity or be famous. I'm literally trying to help people to stay away from abusive relationships. So it was such a shock to me when there were all these people that were just like, and it was all lies. There was so many lies on there.
Oh God.
And it's one thing that I've felt really has sort of impacted on my work. Sometimes I will write something or I'll go to post something and what will pop into my head is, what will the people on the bullying site be saying about this?
Yeah, and it just shouldn't be that way. Yeah, like you should be free to just be making the content that you think's good because obviously that's what resonates with the people who you care about their opinion, like the people who you're helping, Yeah,
it's almost like you can hear the voices of the bullies and you can hear what they're going to say in sort of everything you do. So that is probably the most negative for me. Aside from that, it's, I guess there's other negatives in terms of just, I don't know, actually. I'm not sure if there are other negatives. I have to look at the positives. I think the trolling and the kind of public exposure side of things is really difficult. Oh, the other thing is that I basically have phased myself out of being able to meet any new men because, again, on that bullying site, last time I went on dating apps, they screenshot my pictures, and really tried to humiliate me on there with that. So I can't use dating apps. And it's really difficult because if I meet new people, which I do, I tend to meet men when I'm out and about, I have to like live a lie. They say, what do you do for a living? And I'm like, I can't say I'm an influencer because they'll say, what what's your page? And I'll be like, well, I can't tell you, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I totally know what you mean with that, because I think I'm single at the moment and like obviously go on lots of dates. I've got a dating podcast and it always comes down to it when they're like, oh, what's your podcast about? And I'm like, I really don't want to tell you. And then they're always like, are you going to put me on there? Like, are you going to make fun of me? And I'm like, no. But then obviously, like, if they do something weird, it's going on the podcast.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to lie. It's going on there.
Do you tell them what your podcast is and do they listen to it?
Well, sometimes, like before we meet, because they'll be like, oh, I really want to check it out. And sometimes guys, they're so great. They're like, oh, it's so funny. I love it. Your voice is cool, like blah, blah, blah. But then some of them, sometimes they just stop replying because they just must panic and be like, oh my God, no way, not for me. I get it. But like, yeah, I totally get what you mean. It is weird working in this field because it's just a bit of a nightmare sometimes.
Yeah, it is. And I get that thing of feeling, and I've had that before where I have kind of alluded to people. I'll be like, you know, I write for women, or I'll be a bit vague or whatever. And they always ask that same question, are you going to write about me? Am I going to be in your book? And it's like, no, you're not that interesting,
yeah,
Gary.
like you're not that interesting.
Yeah.
Or they want to come on and they're like, can I do an episode? I'm like, absolutely not. You're not funny enough. You're not interesting enough. Oh God. Well, on a more positive note, you have recently released a book, which I believe it was the start of this year.
February.
February. And can you just tell everyone listening a bit more about your book, Block, Delete, Move On, and how's it all going?
It's going incredibly well. I'm really pleased with the reception that the book has been given. I want every woman to read it. I actually want all men to read it too, but really, I wrote it aimed at women who date men. Although I've had so much feedback from people in, you know, queer people and from men. So and from people in relationships as well. But really, it's supposed to be a dating guide for heterosexual women who are dating men. Because one of the things that when I spoke at the beginning about the kind of connecting the dots things, one of the things that I didn't kind of connect the dots with when I was dating, especially in my earlier years, was how much of an impact like misogyny has on dating and how so many things are happening to me that just never happened to my single male friends on dates. You know, having to be wary of allowing them to see where you live, or scary things happening on a date, or being pressured into sex and then ghosted, or being belittled if you haven't sent nudes, you know, just all these tiny little things that were just so like, okay, this happens to me because of gender roles, you know, this is just this shit that just doesn't happen to men. So when I made the connection between like misogyny and dating, I was like, wow, big light bulb. And so then I also made connections to like the red flags that I was waving. I had been quite manipulative and controlling in a previous relationship, not abusive, but certainly there were things that I had done which were a bit like, you know, getting upset if he was going out for a night out with his boys and like starting an argument or whatever, you know. And I had to look back and reflect on what I was bringing to dating. And so I guess I applied all my knowledge from social work around attachment theory. And one of the other things that I connected was that actually being single is really okay. And that I'd gone through my whole life up until my mid-30s feeling like I had to be with someone. And if I wasn't, I couldn't function. So really the whole premise of the book, the idea of the book started from those three concepts, which is like, I really need women who are dating men to understand the impact of misogyny. I really need women who are dating men to understand that it's actually okay to be single. But I also need us all to look in ourselves and have a look at the patterns that we are repeating and seeing if we can break any of those to have a more healthy dating experience. So that's the first 3 chapters of the book. And then the rest of the book goes into spotting particular types of fuckboys, where to meet people. Once you do meet people, spotting the red flags on dates, how to, you know, understand going through things like ghosting or breadcrumbing or the ick or whatever. And then there's a whole chapter on sex, because I don't think that cis-het women are having the best time when it comes to sex.
100%,
things could be a lot better. So I did a whole chapter on kind of like, should we even have sex with these guys? Like, is he worth disturbing your pH for? And I've done a chapter on like the rough side of things, the dating dangers, the things we need to look out for. And then the final chapter is all about like dealing with things when they go wrong. Like if you get your heart broken, and just like pulling yourself back up, making yourself feel better. Even if that's not a long-term heartbreak, I think some of us get really sad about a situationship ending. And, so chapter 9 is all about that. So for me, it's just like a comprehensive guide that would have helped me if I'd have read it when I was a teenager before going into dating. It would have helped a lot. But it's not just for teenagers. I've got an email this morning from a 54-year-old woman who said that it had changed her life.
Amazing.
So, yeah, it's been really nice.
I was going to ask what's your all-time best dating advice, but I think the advice is read the book.
Oh, that's the only advice. That's why I've written the book. So no, anyone asks me, I'm like, just read the book.
Just read it, hon.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. And so I also wanted to speak to you because obviously you write a column for OK and you write a lot about Love Island. And I just wanted to know, what do you think of reality dating shows, and if you think there's a line with healthy viewership and versus toxic entertainment? Like overall, what are your thoughts on dating shows?
I think they're awful. I really like first dates. I really like first dates. That's the only dating show that I really approve of, because I think that they have a really diverse group of people on there, and I think they match people really nicely. Like, that if there's a black woman on there who likes black men, they're going to match them up. If there's an older person in their 70s, they're not going to put them with a 30-year-old or whatever. So first dates I really, really like.
It's quite wholesome.
It does feel wholesome, and it just feels kind. Like they paint people in a kind of kind picture. They're not sort of setting them up, pitting them off against each other in some competitive thing. And that's what I think is the kind of evil behind a lot of the reality dating, is this kind of constructed kind of like game playing, which we all know that game playing is not going to get you very far in a relationship. Yeah. So yeah, I think pitting people off against each other, it all being focused so heavily around like looks and physical appearance, most dating shows only having one body type on there, no disabilities, very few people of diverse ethnicities. I just don't think that they are healthy in any way, and I feel the same about Love Island, and I actually think Love Island is the worst of the worst. And if me boycotting it would do anything, then I would, but it's not going to do anything. So the best thing for me to do is keep an eye on it and be able to spot the red flags and highlight some of those things for my younger audience. I think it's detrimental. I hate it. I hate every part of it.
And what are your thoughts on this season of Love Island so far? Because I've seen you've done some commentary on Instagram and stuff, but overall, like, what are you thinking of it so far?
I think it's disgusting. I think that the fact that they are pretty much centering the whole show around a 19-year-old is really creepy. Like, it has become the Gemma show. Why are you bringing her ex-boyfriend in, and apparently bringing another ex-boyfriend in?
I heard about this.
What?
I was like, is that real? Surely
can't
not. Can't be real.
It's just awful. I think that their duty of care to protect people's mental health is non-existent. I don't think they should have 19-year-olds in there, full stop. I think that nobody under the age of 25 should be in there, quite frankly, because your brain hasn't even fully developed until you're 25. And like we were saying at the beginning, there is that thing of like, well, they know what they signed up for. But really, when you were 19, if I look back, I was a moron when I was 19.
Yeah,
and
I was still a kid. Like,
exactly.
You're still a kid.
And you're supposed to be a moron when you're 19. Like, and this is difficult for people who are 19 to hear me say this, because they'll be like, what? Like, fuck off. And I would have been the same, because I thought that I was a full-blown adult with my eyes open to the world. But trust me, there is not a 25-year-old alive that will not look back and go, yeah, I was very different at 19. That, that we change, we grow. We're supposed to still be teens when we are 19. And I think it's really dangerous to have teenagers in a show like that, and then to center everything around her. But also there's so much stuff in there that just makes me feel like, ugh. They have to do these tasks where they're like, they did one the other day that it was like an airport security thing, and they had to like search each other
like
and
frisk
stuff.
each other, yeah.
Yeah, and they're all like mixing outside of their couples, you know, choosing different people to search or having to search someone based on who answered the question or whatever. And I'm just wondering, like, where the line of consent is. Like, what happens? Do you consent right at the beginning before you go in the show, and then you just have to do anything that you're expected to do?
Yeah, that's so true.
At what point, you know, could somebody during that airport search go, actually, I don't want to be searched by this person?
Yeah, can you withdraw consent?
Can
like
you do
halfway
that?
through? Probably. Yeah, but if you can't, then that is so problematic in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that needs to be much more clear. And actually, if they were starting those, if ITV were truly being responsible to their young audience, those kind of games should be started with a message to say every contestant was asked, and all the way along they have the right to not participate in this game. Make it clear, you know, that they have a responsibility.
Yeah, 100%. And in saying that you think, you know, Love Island is problematic and reality TV dating shows are problematic, where do you see them heading in the future, and whether that's positive or negative?
You know, I do not know, because I think that something like Love Island draws such huge viewing figures and such huge media attention that I think that it can only inspire other production teams to go, well, this is where the money's at. This is what people want to see. And people love it when things go wrong in Love Island. You know, that there's two things that kind of really get everybody talking. Is one is if people are like really nasty to each other or like have a big falling out, and the other is if they have sex. And I think that people who are just keen to exploit viewers and to make money from them will be seeing things like that and creating more and more reality dating shows that involve nastiness and sex. It would be lovely to see a version of Love Island. I don't know how old you are or whether you watched the early day Big Brothers.
Yeah. No, I've seen it, yeah.
But back in the day, Big Brother was so pure. And it was such a group of people that looked so different, and they weren't in there for fame. They had no idea what they were going in there for. They had no idea what life was going to be like when they came out. And it was just a group of adults having really interesting conversations. And if we could move in that direction of like 35-year-olds who do have stretch marks and saggy tits and, you know, bald men with beer bellies, having really fucking interesting conversations, I mean, that would be amazing.
Do you think social media is what's changed all of that?
Yeah, I think, you know, not just social media, I think also this kind of Kardashian-esque influence that we have going on now. You know, like, I don't think social media is necessarily, it wouldn't necessarily have been a problematic thing in itself, but we have now been led down a path where every woman's face looks the fucking same.
Oh, I hate it. Yeah, I can't stand it. Everyone gets the same surgery from the same surgeons and they all look exactly the same.
Yeah, and they all are the same size and they all have the same boobs and they all have the same bum. And I think that we have got this like warped idea now of what humans are supposed to look like and be like. And so yeah, social media plus the types of influence that we are being influenced by on social media, I think is having a really destructive impact.
Seeing the future of reality dating TV is hard, but yeah, it's hard to see a positive coming out of it.
Yeah, I just wonder, like more stuff like first dates would be amazing. But like I say, where's the money? You know,
where's the money?
People go where the money is, don't they?
They do. I wanted to ask you up next, what is your funniest all time dating story? Because obviously you've got so many and, you know, people love reading about them on your blog, but what do you think is your most engaged with, most funny, your favorite story to tell?
Well, I have a few. I do have a few, and I probably will write about this in my next book, some of my dates. This is what I used to blog about, and people absolutely loved it, but I took them all down because I was a bit like, these are actually embarrassing. But now I'm like, oh, well, I'll put them in a fucking book, so then they can never be taken down. There's been a few. So I guess the one that people loved the most was when I Oh, God. Am I allowed to talk about drugs?
You're anonymous. It's fine.
Listen, there's no shame in ever having taken recreational drugs, I think. I don't, there's no shame there's no shame in anything, I just don't think people should promote drug use, which I would never do, because I don't think it's a good thing to do. But, so I went on a date with a guy. I met a guy. We'd had a first date. We had a really nice time. We had a picnic together. And then the second date, I went to his for Blockbusters and chill. This was a long time before the Netflix and chill.
Oh my God.
Before the
awesome.
Netflix days. And he gave me a drink. And I had no idea that there was a ton of MDMA in it.
Oh my God.
Didn't figure it out until I was like high as a kite.
Oh my God.
But these was my like pre-student days. I was a big raver. I was very much into raving and taking drugs. So it wasn't like, that is a disgusting thing for somebody to do, to spike a drink. I'm not saying that was okay or that was acceptable in any way. And if somebody did that to me now, I would call the police. I'd be fucking shocked. But I was like, well, I think I was 19. Again, it shows you like I was a kid, and I was probably just quite happy to get some free drugs at the time. So we were both high, absolutely off our faces, ended up like going to the bedroom, and I was like giving him a hand job. And I had acrylic false nails on at the time. And I thought he came because he screamed really loudly, and then all this wet stuff landed on my legs. So I was like, wow, yay, I've done a really good job here.
Yay.
Yeah. But then he kept screaming, and I was like, this is a bit unusual. It was really dark in the room. I thought, God, I must have done something significant here. I need to remember what I've done. Because he's like,
God.
And,
you're like, I'm amazing.
Yeah, I'm so good at this. And then I turned the light on, and there was blood everywhere. And there was blood literally spurting out of his penis like a water gun. And I thought that I'd started my period. So again, I was really embarrassed, and I was like, oh God, sorry. But then I realized that we hadn't even had sex. What's going on? And then I clocked that I had completely shredded his helmet with my acrylic nail.
Oh my God.
And he clocked that at the same time. And it was a bit, it was a bit like a movie. I don't know if you've seen Stand By Me, where he realizes he's being sucked by the leech, and then he looks down, and then he just collapses. And that's what happened. He realized
he fainted.
Yeah, he fell on the floor, fainted. But the worst thing about it was that I was so off my nut on MDMA that I didn't know how to handle this situation. So I'm off my tits, like, what do we do in this situation? I know what he needs, a banana. So I went and got a banana and tried to stuff it into his mouth, because I thought the potassium might like bring him back to life. But he was
science.
obviously,
it makes sense.
It was awful. And then it wasn't. Then he was just like bleeding out of his dick with banana smushed all over his face. And I was like, I've got to call an ambulance at this point, but I don't know where I am. And I'm really terrified that they're going to come and they're going to be like, why is this man like dead on the floor with banana all over him? Like, but I did find a letter. I found a letter with his address on it, and I managed to call an ambulance. And I actually said to the ambulance people on the phone, like, I've given him a banana. And I really thought they'd be like, yeah, that's right
good.
thing to do. Well done. You are a medical expert. But yeah, they came. An ambulance came. They had to take him to casualty. I went with him. He had to get it stitched up, and yeah, it was absolutely awful.
How sharp were your acrylic nails? That's my question, because I've got these claws right now, and they're like pointy as, and now I'm like, am I a hazard? Are these nails a hazard?
Yes, you are a hazard. I would stay well away from penises if I was you, especially if you are high and in the dark. Yeah.
Oh my God, it
was
insane.
A really bad day. He never spoke to me again.
I mean, I wouldn't. I'm not going to lie. I would never speak to you again, because I'd be traumatized. And for any men listening, I'm sure that they've either switched off or they're clutching their dick right now.
Yeah, don't go near girls with nails.
Oh my God. Speaking of lights off sex, I was like back in, do you have schoolies here? It's like when you finish school and then you go on a little holiday with all your girlies and everyone gets drunk and hooks up with everyone from school and stuff. Do you have that in England?
We don't call it schoolies, no.
Oh, well, it was on schoolies. But anyway, hooking up with this guy with the lights off, and everything, like suddenly there was just, our bodies were really wet. And I was like, what is going on? Like, I'm not that sweaty. Like, I don't really know what's going on. We turn the lights on. He's got a blood nose, blood all over me, all over my whole body, blood all over his body. And he was like, oh my God, like, do you have your period? I was like, no, look at your face. He looks in the mirror and it's literally like just... because it was like probably like 32 degrees up in the Gold Coast in Australia. And when, you know, when it's hot, people get a blood nose like easier. And yeah, just blood absolutely everywhere. So yeah, traumatizing.
So, but you just don't want blood involved with sex, really.
It's not nice, is it?
No.
Feels gross.
Oh, horrible.
But yeah, that's actually my final question. I mean, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This has been an absolute blast. And yeah, I'm buzzing to speak to you. I feel like I feel a bit starstruck. I really love your blog. So thank you so
Don't be
much.
silly. Thank you for having me. Honestly, it's so nice to be invited onto other women's podcasts. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed my chat with Layla. Please let me know on my Instagram at madsworld.mp3 or my website madsworld.co if you have any stories or thoughts of your own to share. Love and elbow taps, and I'll see you in season 7. Peace.